Okay, welcome to our next session, which is on philosophy today. So our challenge is to think about what we think. And philosophy is an excellent discipline for raising questions. And it doesn't mean that it has all the answers, of course. If you're an atheist in philosophy, then you're going to try to give your answers based on no God. If you're a Christian in theology, you're going to try and answer the same questions from a biblical theological point of view. So the overall goal, though, of the whole seminar and philosophy is this: to have the mind of Christ, to develop a biblical worldview. It's the whole purpose. Our mind needs to be renewed because the Bible says it's broken. It's not only broken, it's corrupted. You're corrupted. I'm corrupted. Our mind is full of ideas that aren't true because you read something or a term has come out today that means a lot: fake news. So many people are now realizing, hey, don't believe everything you get on the media or on your computer because a human wrote that. A human with a different view wrote that. And so you need to know that humans have worldviews. And a worldview is their intellectual dictionary, their frame of reference. A worldview is how you see the world. And for Christians, we should and must have a biblical one. So you can be a Christian but not have a biblical mind. Okay, you've probably met some Christians who maybe think abortion somebody's right. You know, it's sad, but hey, everybody has a right. You might think like that, or the world's overpopulated, so or they think this president's good or that prime minister. They have ideas, or they think the Bible is for its time and not everything in there should be trusted because the people who wrote Genesis didn't know anything about science, so which probably doesn't mean God made the world in 6 days. Probably means 6 billion years. There's Christians are into all sorts of stuff. So the key, though, is to examine those ideas. Don't just, it's okay to think something, but you should have a reason for it. And the reason should be based in evidence. So this is, of course, about evidence. We can all have opinions. This is true, that's true, whatever. But it comes down to this: the objective world is here, right? We are in this city, in this year, and that's true. It's not 1980, and we're not in Russia. So if you think we are, you are deceived. We could come down and say that. Well, we're coming into an era now where people are not saying that's being deceived. They might say, well, everybody has their view of reality. I mean, who are you to tell somebody they don't? If they think that, and it's not a harm, then hey, the trouble is the world can't work if it's not there. So one of the big issues of philosophy is what's real. So these are big questions. Philosophy is an important discipline. We want to have the mind of Christ. And so we have to examine ourselves, as the Bible says. Examine yourself, see if you're in the faith. And you should be willing to examine any idea. I remember sitting in Australia many years ago when I was running a course, and I was thinking about the coming election there in Australia, the new prime minister. And like many Christians of the era, we were murmuring and complaining about this one or that one, and especially the economics, which seems to be, hey, that seems to be what's going on today too, isn't it? So I was sitting there and, thinking to myself and just grumbling and that. And I really felt God say to me, sometimes you just get that powerful sense that God has spoken, because an idea came into my head that I hadn't thought of. In the midst of my train of thought, there was this, I heard my name being called, and I don't talk to myself with my name. I don't say, hey, Daryl. So I heard this: Daryl, what would you do if you were treasurer, if you were elected treasurer of Australia? Since I was thinking about economics, right? I'm murmuring, the gas is expensive and the tariffs are up and the imports are down and the pipelines are blocked, What would you do, Daryl? I heard that clear as a bell. And it just set me back, and I thought, and I went into my little cupboard in my head, all the little cupboards, you know, politics, economics, law, but there was no cupboard for economics. Okay, maybe you don't have a cupboard in there either. So, you know, you've only got one cupboard, God, but you haven't built one, a shelf for economics and politics and law and sociology. So your head's empty, like mine was. And I couldn't find the economic truths because I didn't know any. So, like somebody saying, hey, Daryl, go tell me about nuclear energy and or chemical engineering. I go, well, there's no box in there with that information in it. Oh, well, then you don't know anything, do you? Right, I don't. So God challenged me, and I looked for some facts I knew. Should I raise tariffs, ban imports, devalue the dollar? I couldn't decide one thing relating to economics, except, gee, it'd be good if everybody had a job and was working. But hey, that's just standard thinking. And so I really felt the Lord said to me, Daryl, that's why you will never be treasurer. A very sound and useful rebuke. We can't do lots of things if we have no knowledge. I can't fly a plane. My son can. He's a pilot. I marvel sitting next to him in the float plane. I think, oh, I changed your diapers, but you're flying me around now. My life is in your hands. You know, he has knowledge I didn't learn. So I cannot do this. And it's not a matter of faith will help me. No, that's not how God planned for us to be here. But you just pray and your car gets gasoline. And you never have to go to the store again. Food just miraculously appears in your cupboard. And you might, well, God could do that. Yes, but he's not going to. Because that's not the kind of universe he's set up. Right? So we have to have knowledge. How to do medicine. You got to spend 6 years studying surgery over there at the university. You're not going to be invited to do an operation on anyone in the church just because you have faith. No. I say operate on yourself first. So knowledge is important, and yet much of what we think we have as knowledge is not. And so we have to examine ourselves. And that's why we change our minds. I used to be an atheist. I thought that was true because I couldn't see God until issues in my life happened, and I was presented with the reality that where do you think the universe comes from? And suddenly the realization was that Christianity answered the question of reality, existence, who am I, why are we here? So we want the mind of Christ. We want to think biblically. And why do we want to do that? Is that for our benefit? Well, partly. You know, if you're going to drive a car, you better learn how to drive it. Take lessons. If you want to fix your house and you're not an electrician, be very careful with those wires. Better go learn something. Go get a manual and don't mess around with that screwdriver because you might kill yourself. So we want to be able to live in this world and flourish, but we also want to love God more. So if we have wrong ideas about God, then you're going to live wrong, right? You're not going to take care to go to the dentist if you think he's going to heal you, and you're not going to go, and so you're just going to be prayed for, and then you're going to get infections, and then we're all going to wonder why you're dying, and then you're going to say, well, I mean, you know, that can happen. Happened to my friend. He died of prostate cancer simply because he tried to tell God how to do things, and God had already told a doctor how to fix him. So God fixed him, but he wanted to use a doctor. He wanted God to fix him directly. Well, I'm sorry, but we can't tell God what to do. He's trained doctors, and they have God's knowledge, and they can do it. And God wanted to heal him, but he refused God's method. So let God be God. And don't try to force the healing thing on God. It's not going to work. Now, I believe in miracles. Absolutely. I've seen some healing ones, all kinds, but they're not the norm, and I can't dictate when God will or won't. Amen? So I leave it, I pray for miracles, and I leave it up to him. All right, we need the mind of Christ. Let's go to our book. We're looking at this book, of course, for those on the video, and it's Understanding the Times by David Noble and Jeff Myers. So we're going to flip to the page in philosophy. Philosophy is a discipline that we can study. I did 2 degrees in philosophy. I don't know what was wrong with me. The first one I did because I wanted to learn more about God. That's how naive I was. A 1-year-old Christian, I felt, you know what? I'll go to the philosophy department and study it and be marvelous. I can study about God because that's got to be a philosophy concept. Well, it was a big one that underpins everything. And there were a lot of non-Christians there. And so it was not a pleasant experience in the beginning until I learned that, hey, I'm here to learn how to debate ideas. I'm here to learn to think critically about what Marx wrote or this author or that author. And I should be able to think about it. I shouldn't be fearful of thinking because you can change your mind. So why not think? And if you don't like what you think, change it. And if you're wrong about that, get rid of it. So the thing about you is this, and me, ideas are not you. They're like this sweater. I put this on, this is not me. Or, you know, these pants, this is not me. I just put them on and I can change them. Ideas are like clothes. You put them on in there, take them off, get rid of it. You don't like that idea that abortion is right? I don't like it, throw it out, change it. So don't feel that when we tackle ideas, we're tackling you, we're criticizing you as a person. This is impersonal, as philosophy department is meant to be, but it's not. But this is impersonal. An idea is an idea, like we could discuss this sweater. Hey, I'm not going to feel offended. You know, it's this or that. Ideas are like that. So let's not be afraid of them, but let's learn to handle them and let's realize how important they are. Because A.W. Tozer, in the Knowledge of the Holy, his book said the most important thing about you or me at any time in your life is what you think about God. How about that? The most important thing for any civilization on earth, think of the civilizations that have come and gone and that exist now that are praying to the wind or the rabbit or the fox or whatever, or their prophets or the great leader Kim Jong-un or Hitler or any of those people who have ideas of who's got the truth. The world is being tormented and torn by false ideas. So it's really vital that we learn to think and to come to a knowledge of the truth so that we can love God. And that's what Tozer said. Civilizations are ruined when they embrace worldviews that are false. Whether you're the Aztecs in Mexico in the 13th century, the Balinese who are still praying to the wind god now after 1,500 years of Indonesian history, or people in this culture who think that the environment is the most important thing in the whole universe and that there's a spirit in the land. Okay, philosophy, the love of wisdom. That's an important idea. We're commanded to be wise. Philosophy is a study of knowledge, truth, and the nature of ultimate reality. And there's definitions in here. Metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that seeks to understand the nature of reality, because it's not physical in front of you, but metaphysics says, well, why is there being? Why are we here? Who am I? What am I? We're not going to go through all the terms. Epistemology, over on these page 201, the branch of philosophy that seeks to understand the nature of knowledge. So here, this is a really important terms. When somebody says there's no God, they're actually making a statement, but it's invalid to say that because they're not infinite, they're not eternal, they're not omnipresent. They can't possibly know that there's no God because they're stuck on this planet in this one solar system out of all the billions of others. So any human who says there's no God is not stating a fact. They're stating their belief, right? But they're stating it like it's a fact. There's no God. So you flip it around if you want to do evangelism this way now and say, well, that's an interesting idea you got there. Do you have any evidence for that? Like, always ask people for evidence. Don't let people get away and just make rash statements as though they're true just because they think it. You need to realize this. People think things that aren't true. That's why we have these worldviews. That's why we have major wars through the human history. That's why Cain killed Abel. That's why Napoleon did what he did. Mao Zedong did what he did. Bin Laden did what he did. People have ideas and they believe them. And that's where it gets dangerous. So people believe their ideas like you believe yours. The question is, who's got the truth? And that's what it's going to come down to. What is the truth? And how do I find out truths in economics, in politics, in law, etc.? So this whole course is designed to open up the questions to those areas. So you put a little box. You go ahead, build some cupboards in your head, the politics box, the economics one. You need that so that if somebody says, well, what's a Christian view of economics? Well, you can go and say, well, these humans are meant to be free. So the free market is better than communist control, for sure. So that would help me, considering a US person right now. I don't want to date the tape, so I'm not going to give the name because we might use it for a few years. Somebody's running for president in the United States right now, and they have views economically and politically that are way over on the left. They're basically almost communist. You know, we won't name names. And so, hey, is that a biblical position? Everything should be free for everyone. Education, medicine, healthcare. We're going to wipe out all debts. People can have freedom. They should be paid a living wage just for being in the country. Sound like God would want that? Where is it in the Bible? So there's all kinds of issues with that. We have to think. So how should we vote? People are going to vote for this person because you know why? There's a huge upswing in the number of 18-year-old voters. Like every year, whole bunches of millions of people come 18 years old and they get to register and they have nothing in their head. Scary thought. You and I might think, hey, we've been here long enough to know now there's some dangers with it. Well, 18-year-old out there, he doesn't know anything. He's going to vote. That's why we got the prime minister we got. Because he said, I'm going to give you free this, free that, free everything. Do you remember this? He's ruined the economy. Ruined it. So nothing's free. Not even salvation. It's free, but guess what? You have to repent and die to yourself. It's costly. All right, philosophy. So epistemology is a question of knowledge. Somebody says, you know, there is no God. So that's an interesting question. How do you know that? Well, of course I know that. Well, how do you know that? Have you been to Pluto? Have you been to the next Andromeda star? No. Oh, well, maybe God's there. I mean, seriously, how can you say that? So you can't. So you believe that. So they have a worldview. It's called atheism. There is no God. And the question is this: is there more evidence for God or for not God? In other words, you know those three possibilities: atheism, theism, or pantheism. There is a God, or there is no God. There is a God, and everything's God. That's the only three possibilities. Well, the atheists say there's no God. I say there is. So who has the most evidence? Well, we're going to see that the Bible has the best evidence. That's why I'm still a Christian. I'm not back in atheism. I can't go become a Buddhist. I can't become a Muslim. They all lack evidence. They all lack the ability to explain life the way we know it to be. Morals, values, purposes, existence, chemistry, physics, the universe, history, Jesus Christ. So it's impossible to be anything but a Christian. I'm going to say this. It's impossible to be anything but a Christian unless you're going to suppress the truth in unrighteousness, which is what people do. Right? They don't want to know. So epistemology addresses the issue of knowledge. How do you know something? People say, you know, you're born homosexual. I'm going to ask a question. How do you know that? The world's overpopulated. That's an interesting epistemological question. I'm going to say to somebody, how do you know that? Well, you know, global warming's happening. It's going to wipe out the polar bears. That's an interesting idea. How do you know that? CNN said this, blah, 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 blah. They're, you know, you go, well, how do you know that? See, we should be critically assessing ideas all the time, not be so rash to jump into somebody else's opinion. There's 1 billion people who pray to cows, think that cows are reincarnated mothers. Now, you know, might make them feel good and they don't want to eat beef. But the question is an epistemological one. How do I know what a cow is? What is a cow? That's a question, isn't it? Is it a god? Really? Or is it T-bone steaks? I mean, 1 billion people could be wrong, do you think? or we're wrong. Shouldn't be eating it. So these are not small things. Philosophy underpins everything, and it is the discipline of questions. Okay, so epistemology, knowledge. Scientific empiricism is a big thing today in our culture. On page 201, the belief that we can only know what we discover through the scientific method. Okay, there are people who say, well, if science has proved it, it's true. Who would like to ask me a question about that? Should you be able to raise a question about that? Oh, yeah. Who is Mr. Science? What is science? What do you mean science says? Who's that? Your local chemistry professor? Who's he? I mean, what's he? How? Maybe he knows more than me in some areas, but not. How does he know there's no God? How does he know where atoms and molecules came from? He doesn't. He just believes. If you're an atheist, you believe all things came from nowhere. Okay. An atom came from nowhere. And life came from nowhere. And all these animals and birds and snowflakes and trees and grass and everything just all came out of that first little atom. You believe that? You think that's science? You think that's a scientific statement there? No, it's not. So we're going to look at the scientific method. Scientific method that's valid and useful. If something is true, scientifically a fact, it should be observable. Okay? I see this computer here. I see this projector. I can observe something. I believe there is a projector there. I can see it. It's observable. Second, it should be measurable. So I can go over there. I can touch it. I can measure this object. I should be able to quantify it. Measurable, quantifiable. And I should be able to go back and do this a few times and get the same result. Repeatable. So I can measure it again and again, and it's the same size, same size, same size. It's real. It's a fact that there is a projector there on the table of such and such a dimension. The scientific method is a correct way to go about assessing that. Is it observable? Is it measurable? Can I quantify it? And is it repeatable? So if I want to boil water, you do this in high school, you put it in a thing, they put a thermometer in there, water boils at 100 degrees centigrade, 212 Fahrenheit. Let's see if it does it, class. It does. Let's do it again. It does. So that the scientific method has proven that water boils at 100 degrees centigrade. True? True. So if you say it doesn't, you're deceived because the evidence is there. Now, when we get to issues like the universe, where did it come from? None of us were there. Not the most brilliant scientists on the planet today. So he was not there, okay? We're all of us are on this planet right now. Nice to meet all of you. I'm glad I didn't live 200 years ago, really. And there was no car, just life driving, you know. Like, how far could I get on horseback? How long would it take to get to Vancouver from here on horse? Oh, it wouldn't be fun. Anyway, I'm thankful. But anyway, you cannot state and teach at university, which they are, that the universe came from nowhere, which is not observable, right? Not observable by anybody. I don't care if you're from Harvard, Yale, whoever you are. You have never observed that. So don't make that, I mean, you might say that, but that's not a scientific fact because it's not observable, it's not measurable, it's not quantifiable, and certainly not repeatable. It was a one-time historical event. Now, the thing where the scientific community and the Bible agree is the universe began instantly. Well, that in itself tells me something right there. There is a God. End of story there. End of story. The universe began instantly. And of course, the atheist goes, there was a big explosion. Yeah, what exploded? You need something to go bang. And something just doesn't go bang if there's nothing in the universe. There is no universe, there is no bang. There's nothing. Nothing is nothing. It's the most ridiculous idea being taught at every major university in the West. The universe started by itself, no cause, because everything in the universe has a cause. This table, we know it has a cause. I don't know who made this table, but you and I know somebody did. You're right? Agree with that? Everything you see, including you, had a cause. Little kids will ask them, where did I come from, mommy? It was your mommy and your daddy. The causation effects. That's what. Everything has a cause. We can trace everything. That tree out there, the bush, the bug. We know where it can be traced back to, except the universe itself. And the Bible says, in the beginning, God. Makes absolutely perfect scientific sense. God created. Makes absolutely perfect scientific sense. There was a cause to matter. Matter cannot come into existence. Existence can't exist without some purpose. Existence, the fact that there is a universe here and you're in it, can't be possible unless someone of incredible power, ability, and nature purposed existence. And that someone could not be part of the universe. He can't be a branch of a tree or a cow. He can't be in the atoms, because then he's controlled by it. He has to be separate from matter. He has to be greater than matter, greater than the universe. He can't be one of the parts of the universe. Understand that? He has to be the cause of everything. That's big. So philosophy is going to deal with this question, but scientific empiricism is what we got today. When people say, well, science has proven this, they've proven that, you go, what do you mean science? Who's Mr. Science? So I don't accept all these statements by scientists, whoever they are, right away. Global warming, finite resources, overpopulation, blah, 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 blah. Now, there may be some truths in there, but not the degree to which, I can tell you this, when the whole earth agrees on something, it's absolutely got to be false. There's no way that all humans could have the truth on something. Do you know what I'm saying there? When everybody in every country is telling you the world's overpopulated, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so scientific empiricism, a big philosophy. We're going to question the mind-body problem. We're going to deal with that in psychology. Do we have a non-physical part of us? Well, we're going to leave that because that's going to come up in psychology. We'll go to secularism, naturalism. That's another philosophy. Natural. Everything's here by natural causes. It just happened. That's part of the atheist worldview, the secular worldview. I'm going to zip through this real quick because I want to get to the PowerPoint. Marxism. Marx was an atheist or a God hater. He had some religious experience, but he turned his heart and went radical. And his poetry, we're going to refer to a couple of them later, show that he had a demonic experience. He said the Prince of Darkness gave him a sword, and with which he would destroy the world. And any nation that embraced him would go to ruin. That's the poem that he wrote. And you can get it through a book, I believe in Satan's Downfall by Michael Green. And so nations that embraced communism all have been in ruin. Pick one that's functioning. North Korea, Communist China, Russia. What about the nations that bought into the Marxist dream? Vietnam, maybe. Maybe that's a good story. Cambodia, Nicaragua. How about Venezuela? They should be pretty progressive. All in ruin. So we have some evidence here, right, folks? This is not like my opinion. Hardcore evidence. Nations don't work when you have communist governments. Why not? Well, because Marx listened to an angel, that's why. And it wasn't an angel from up, it was an angel from below. And we talked in our theology last time, angels have visited earth, right? And given people books, Mormonism, Islam, and Mr. Marx. We should really take note and go, you know, that's a fascinating fact. So, Marxists are atheists, but they have a particular view that matter itself, atoms, behave in a certain way. There's a machine there, just like this projector and computer. When you hit the button and turn it on, you know, the mechanisms cause it to work, and there's no ghost in there. It's all machinery, electronics. And so when you start your car, it all works that way, and the car will run because all the pieces of the matter and the machines that have been designed by Mr. Ford and the others all make the thing go. But there's no magic in it. So philosophers in the Marxist camp believed that there was a kind of consciousness in matter. There was a kind of a ghost in the machine of nature that was inevitably going in one direction. So there was a number of philosophers who put this all together. Hegel, Feuerbach, and Nietzsche and others contributed to this philosophical mix that inspired Marx to think, yeah, I know how history is going to work. I know where it's all going. Now you think of this today. I mean, people think they know where history is going. Now the Christian knows the ultimate end of all things is we're going to meet God, and this planet's going to go or be rebuilt. It's going to be a new heaven, a new earth. And we believe that because Jesus Christ rose from the dead, and I believe him over Buddha, Marx, or bin Laden, or Muhammad. We don't know when, but he said we had a job to do, which was discipling nations. So we should get on with that, and we'll worry about everything else when it happens. But right now, we can see clearly what we should be doing, destroying philosophies. So we're going to look at that. All right, so Marx taught that materialism was true. Nothing in the universe but matter, molecules and atoms. And it's organized in a certain way. It's kind of conscious. And he came up with this thing, dialectical materialism. Okay, go on page 205. And dialectical materialism is the belief that only the material world exists and that class struggles are the mechanism behind social and economic progress. For example, the current economic clash between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie will eventually give way to socialism and the end of capitalism. So dialectical materialism is popularized by Hegel, George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. He had a big input in this, and he taught that the machine had this program. Matter itself was going to lead to a communist-run world. Communism was the highest form of social, political, economic organization, and that evolution had that goal. Imagine that. Just think of that, okay? These people, you'd be pretty excited if you thought that evolution, number one, notice this, they believe evolution's true because, of course, they can't have God. So evolution happened, and it's been chugging along from that first cell to that amoeba to the worm to the monkey to the horse to you, as somebody said, from goo to you via the zoo. I mean, that would have to be what's going on. Everything came out of one thing, but where did all the information come from? Well, we don't want to talk about that. Oh, we don't want to talk about information that decided the difference between a cow and a fish and a bird and a tree. Information called DNA. We don't want to talk about information, where that can come from. Just all these things came together. Just all happened. So his idea was, it's happening and it's all moving towards a social political evolution, not just biological, but political social is also part of biology, right? So in other words, societies evolve. So he took biology one step further. Societies evolve. And he came up with 5 steps. Why are there 5 steps? Who knows? He just thought it up. 5 steps that societies evolve. They all start off as slave societies. There were slaves in Egypt, whatever, right? And then they got a bit more organized, and slavery was kind of fought. And then there were feudal lords. So feudalism kind of emerged out of the slavery, went to feudalism as the next stage, where you had the feudal king or lord looking after the manor and all the people. So then from there it went to capitalism. And from there it's going to go to socialism. And once the world is socialist, it will become automatically communist. So the communist parties right now that run North Korea, China, Russia, and the ones who are in power in some of these countries in South America, they believe this. The military and the leaders of China believe that they will destroy the West. And the Communist Party will one day rule every country. And not only do they believe it, they actively work to bring it about. They do wars, Vietnam, Korea, Cambodia, Central America. You see, the Marxists have been leading revolutions to topple governments ever since 1917, when it all kicked off. That's when Lenin launched the Bolshevik Revolution. 1917, took the ideas of Marx and declared a revolution, destroyed the system of the czars, right, they had for a long time, and instituted the Communist Party. The Communist Party, they believe, is the seed of the future communist state. It's not the state yet, it's just the gardener. It's just the person who's going to bring it about. So they have to get all power to themselves using the military, dictatorship 100%, execute anyone who dares question this. And have they done this? Absolutely. And invade country after country after country so that we can topple them all. So this was at its peak when Ronald Reagan came to power. He said to the Gorbachev, "You're not going to take one more country while I'm president." And he didn't. In fact, he stared down the Soviet Union and they collapsed away. But they're not gone. Putin is a communist, and the communists run the Soviet Union. Don't kid yourself. They're just using the guise of, we have an open society. No, Putin and the Communist Party run everything. And if you're a dissenter, suddenly you find yourself dead from being, stabbed with a little umbrella or something. He gets rid of all people. So the Communist Party is alive and well. And the tragic thing is, it's not just over there, because Marxism has a certain kind of belief system, and they operate in your universities, and they're running for elections in the United States and in Canada. They have the mindset that we need socialism. And they even say it. We're socialists. So it's not gone. It's not over there. It's a kind of mind that believes in government taking power increasingly until you end up with a dictatorship. And can this happen here? Absolutely, it is happening. Government-run enterprises, losing money by the billions, ICBC, or hundreds of millions. Hydro, trains, buses, whatever. Government shouldn't be running everything, especially when they have a socialist mindset. So anyway, we're going to get to economics on that one. So the dialectical is this, okay? Hegel taught that history is moving inevitably in that direction because evolution is a fact. And he figured out, now we know that social evolution is a fact, political evolution is a fact. There's these 5 stages: slavery, feudalism, capitalism, socialism, communism. And they were in the capitalist phase. That's where the whole thing was launched, right? 1917. So now we have the USA, we have Canada, we have all these capitalist, nasty countries. We need to get rid of them. We need to undermine them. We need to move people towards socialism. We need to elect socialist leaders. We need to establish huge unions that can control businesses and fight the business owners. So unionism became massive in the West in 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And it's having some effect now, but unions were the ones that would fight and destroy the corporations whom they saw as the enemy. Man, they still have unions that do that today. We used to have a postal strike in Canada every year when I was growing up. Remember that? Every year at Christmas, the postal system would go on strike. So it was privatized, taken out of the hands of the government, or at least partly out of the hands of the government. Okay, so dialectical materialism is the idea that things move 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You ever heard of that? And the Soviets used to march like that. Their soldiers take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward. That was the idea that this machine kind of chugs along, moving things, but there's always a bit of a back step every now and then. You make it progress and you go back, but you keep going, make progress, go back. And the logic of it is, just like when you have a hammer and a nail and you're trying to bang a nail into a piece of wood. There are 2 actions required to put that nail into the wood. There's the striking of the nail with power to knock part of it in, and there's the withdrawal of the hammer. 2 actions. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step. So that is what caused them to launch invasions, and the West would retaliate in Vietnam and send troops to fight it, and they might withdraw, but they would press on further. And so when they won that war, because the US, due to political weakness in will, pulled out, the whole country lost 5 million people were killed by the communist Khmer Rouge. We don't see the NBC in there now talking about the victorious communist takeover of Vietnam or Cambodia. They don't want to talk about those millions of people shot by Pol Pot. You guys remember all this? Yeah. Oh no, we don't want to talk about that now. No. Or the millions who've been killed in China or North Korea or any other communist revolution. 40 million people were starved to death by Stalin when he took power in the Soviet. The Kulak peoples, 40 million, starved them out. Just cut off all the agriculture and they couldn't plant food. Huge purges. Mao Zedong, remember him? 10 years, kids couldn't go to school. He had the Cultural Revolution. 10 years, he shut all schools. We've got to train the people to think communistically, comrade. Well, all that stuff still goes on, and it happens in the universities, because there's a lot of Marxists who believe that, and they're still teaching out there that family's evil. Get rid of the Western bourgeoisie family model. We can have anything we want. Family can be anything, and the courts in Canada agree with that. So we have going on now what is called cultural Marxism. The destruction of the West from the inside by people whose goal is the same as a Marxist, to destroy the structures of the West, to bring in a new era. It's powerful. It really is. They're in the campuses, absolutely, lecturing. They don't say they're Marxists. You know what they call themselves? Progressives. You ever heard the term? Progressives. They're progressives. Obama said he's a progressive. They all use that term. You know what you need to ask? What's progress? This is a key question. This is a philosophy question. What do you mean progress? I want you to learn this. Get used to identifying questions that will open up new conversations and witnessing chances for you. And somebody says, you know, we need to make progress. Say, what do you mean by progress? Where are we going? I mean, somebody says, if you're on a hike, right, and you're 5 miles from the lake, and somebody says, well, where are you? Yeah, well, I'm 3 miles from the lake. How do you know? Well, here's the trail, and that's where I'm going. So how much progress you got? Well, I made 3 miles out of 5. But where is a nation supposed to go? What's progress for a nation? Get rid of the family, get rid of morality, drugs for everybody, abortion, infanticide, euthanasia, no oil, just, we're going to celebrate wolves and moose out there in the tundra, not build anything, get rid of your car because oil's evil, stop heating your house because gas is evil. We can't have a gas pipeline. There might go through an area where there's some moose. I mean, I'm going to be a bit sarcastic. That's the Aussie coming out. But hey, that's what's going on, and people are blocking the streets for this. And thousands of people have lost their jobs in Canada. Thousands and thousands. It's taken an economic hit in the billions of dollars, this silly little anti-law. I shouldn't get upset about this, but I am. Lawlessness. We have laws to operate. Everyone can demonstrate, but they can't block somebody else's driveway. If they can demonstrate wherever you want. You just can't shut the country down. Shut the trains, planes, buses, roads. That's lawless. It's anarchy. And you've destroyed thousands of people's livelihoods. So what about the law? Well, we'll cover the law later, won't we? See, so much to talk about. All right, so let's go past dialectical materialism. Just keep that in mind. They believe that if you invade a country in the West or the world pushes back, you retreat a bit, but don't worry, there'll be another thrust. You'll be opposed, but just go again. So basically, it's this idea that evolution will go forward, but there'll be some opposition, biological, political, but then you just push forward again, and then there might be more opposition, but just keep pushing forward. So because they kept conquering so many countries, from 1917 to Ronald Reagan, 1984, they just had this victory. Well, look, comrades, we just can take a country. Yeah, they come to fight us in North Korea, but guess what? Okay, we didn't get the whole South, right? But look, we got half of Korea. Okay, half of Korea is communist, the South isn't. But don't worry, Kim Jong-un believes he'll get the South yet, right? That's what he's doing with his missile program. So that's the way the mind works. And that's exactly what Putin's doing in Syria and Iran. They're arming Iran so they can provoke the U.S. Maybe the U.S. will get weak, and then we'll get Iran in that territory. You know, China and Russia are arming Iran. Well, why would they do that if they're our friends? Well, they're not your friend if they're Marxists. So we got to stop thinking that because you can buy products from China, they're a nice place. Not run by the Communist Party. They do nothing to help any country become more democratic because they're not democratic themselves. So we must be very careful not to ship all our industry and everything to China. It must not. It must start stopping. And at least somebody came along in the United States, the new president, and said, that's it. We want some of these American businesses back here. We want to generate our own economy. And the US economy has skyrocketed, as it should. Thank the Lord, because that nation is carrying the burden of keeping you and I free from China, Russia, and any other Islamic terrorist organization that has the missile, has a nuke. We can do nothing to defend ourselves, especially with a prime minister who's gutted the military. So, people, be wise in the kind of ideas you promote. But the dialectical material one is a nasty one. Okay, so they're very active still. Let's move on to the postmodernists. Postmodernism is atheistic based as well. Postmodernists claim that everybody has a truth, that truth is determined by your ethnicity or your gender or your sexual preference or whatever, and no one should say that they have the truth over somebody else. So truth is what you say in your particular group. And so the pygmies over there in the jungle, you shouldn't be sending missionaries over there. That's cruel and mean. They have their truth. Leave them alone. Who are you to bring your Christian story to their story? Everybody has stories, and all these stories are valuable and true. So don't ruin their stories. So this is part of the big deal of postmodernism, and it's everywhere. It's in the courts, in the government, and especially in academia, which is churning out all these individuals, okay, who are in your courts and your government, etc. We all have our stories. There's no real truth. Everybody has a story, and for them that's true, and you should appreciate their stories and incorporate their historical stories into your teaching of history in all your subjects. Because the lesbians and homosexuals have these valuable stories. So we need to rewrite all the curriculum, putting all the positive role models of homosexuals and lesbians and everybody in those history books so that we can see their stories. So we love the person of the homosexual and the lesbian, but not the ideology that is to undermine a view that marriage between a male and a female is perfectly good and normal. So there's a clash of ideas here, and those clashes are always going to come out. So the postmodernist is anti-real, anti-realism, the denial of the existence of an objective reality. postmodernism holds to anti-realism. So that's a problem, because postmodernists do fly in planes and they do eat food and they do, drive carefully down the road. So there must be a reality. So here's the problem. Postmodernism contradicts itself. Postmodernism says there's no truth, but if there's no truth, then postmodernism could not be true itself. Do you get that? So if somebody said there's no truth, they're stating a truth, that there are none. Would have to be true that there are none. But then that's one. So that's ridiculous to say there are no truths and you believe that what you're saying is true, do you? So when somebody says something like that is no truth, say, well, is it what you're saying true then? Because they believe themselves. They want that philosophy to work. So they suppress you. They suppress you and say there's no truth. Well, then why are you talking? You should ask them, why are you talking then? And why are you writing books that the whole world works like this if it's not true? Right? Do you see the contradiction there? Does everybody understand that? If there's no truth, why are you speaking? Why are you believing what you're thinking? I mean, it's insane. It's a madness that's gripped the Western world. And this is what's brought in a lot of this attack on the family, attack on marriage, attack on gender. Everything is under huge attack because this philosophy has come in and it's come into the courts. So now if you say, I don't agree with same-sex marriage, that could be a crime in Canada because that's been determined to be hateful. So now the courts weigh in and punish people who think what essentially might be a biblical position. So what's happening is persecution is now happening for anyone who questions the state and its new ideology on gender, on marriage, on sexuality, on priorities, on pipelines, on whales, on boats in the harbor, and how bothered the whale has been by the boat's motor. I mean, look, everything starts changing because people now adopt a view of reality that's not real, and they force that upon you and punish people who disagree. That's exactly what the Marxists did. They put everyone who was a dissident went to Siberia. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote the Gulag Archipelago, detailing I don't know how many, whether it was in the millions, I would think, of people shipped off to these camps never to come back. They were re-educated, comrade. And in other words, so did the Vietnamese. They re-educated those 5 million people. When the Americans pulled out, they went and shot them all, shot them. They had glasses, they were shot. They could read, they were shot. You know why? Because you are an intellectual. We want everybody to be a worker, to just go out in those rice fields and work. So they shot anyone who had an education because they were ruined. They were not Marxists. That's the purge of the Khmer Rouge, of Pol Pot. Horrendous. Millions died. And this, you know what? Kids don't even learn this in school. They've never heard of Marxism. They've never even heard. It's not being taught about the Vietnam War, and that ended in 1975. We remember that. I remember. So, you know, what's happening is history is not being taught. It's being rewritten. That's another very favorite topic of the postmodernists. Rewrite history, change it, and people will believe differently about it. Let's tell those stories about all those terrible, terrible, what are those schools where they sent the natives? Residential schools. All evil, wicked, nasty. They had them in Australia too. The reality is some of the native practices were not conducive to good family structure. And you have to ask yourself the question, what would Jesus say to those natives? To keep praying to their gods? Or would he ask them, you know what? I am the way, the truth, and the life. So the residential schools were set up to tell them that. They were set up by the church with the government support. Hey, we're going to tell them I am the way, the truth, and the life. Will that change the culture? Of course. Has it changed me? Of course. Does the gospel change a Hindu? Of course. He won't be praying to the cow. He'll have a T-bone steak. So it changed natives. Some aspects were not good, just like some aspects of colonialism were not good, but the majority of it was useful. Were there excesses? Yes. Was it all bad? No. Colonialism all bad? No, of course not. Because we got to answer this question. How did God intend the gospel to spread if you don't go out? I mean, think of this. God has a purpose in history. And part of it was launching countries like Canada that would be places where the gospel would keep going. So the British Commonwealth was partly, you can't say it's just a human event. God kicked the disciples out of Jerusalem by persecution, right? Got them out of there, it spread, and they started going to the Gentiles. So the gospel has to spread. And when it goes somewhere, those people will burn their idols. They will burn their gods. They will throw them away. That's part of the process that I did. The Hindus do that. The Buddha, anybody who becomes to Christ, puts him first and stops worshiping Caesar. And that's what natives did too. So there are lots of wonderful Christians, First Native peoples. I love the show, Tribal Trails. I'm going to say it right on there. I love that show. I cry when I watch that show. I would rather watch Tribal Trails than any one of those mega superstar evangelists. You know, that I won't give names. Because these people are really real. And they play guitar in a very simple way. And it's not professional. I'm not putting them down. It's just like there's no fanciness on that show. And these people have been touched, and they go out and talk to their people about how Jesus Christ is Lord of their tribe. And they're saying, anyone ever seen it? You guys seen it? You should watch it. So who am I to say that's wrong? God changes people, and he'll change entire countries and that. And the colonial era was part of the spread of the concentration of people in Europe to the ends of the earth. And they set up a Canada and an Australia and then in New Zealand, and they went all over Africa, and they planted governments, and they planted law, and they planted tea and crops, and et cetera, et cetera. So you can't go and say we're anti-colonial and see this big sign from a protester, out with colonialism. Like, you know how bad the natives were to each other? If we want to get on that topic, how many of them ate each other? Do you think the Mohawks and the Comanches were buddies, and they all loved each other? Why did they have weapons? Aboriginals all had weapons. They used to kill each other. So we've got to not be against people, but be against ideas that cropped up that aren't true in history. But you know, if you mention anything about this, you might be, you're going to be charged with a hate crime because you're speaking the truth. Jesus was charged with a hate crime, really, right? You're calling yourself God. That's blasphemy. Okay, so postmodernism. We're going to look at that. That is huge. And they are the ones who believe that reality is constructed by the individual or his culture or his gender. And we are going to have a break today, trust me, absolutely. Okay, new spiritualism. What's really real is the spiritual, not the physical. The New Age people believe everything is divine. Oprah Winfrey said that too. The dog, you, me, the tree, we're all energy. So what is persons then? Who are persons? This is the problem of New Age spirituality. What's a person then? Do you exist, or are you just energy in a physical form like the tree? So there's a big issue of what is the self? So, and then of course you got other aspects like reincarnation that have no evidence for. But anyway, so the picture of the new spiritual world is evolutionary as well. We're going to see that all worldviews except Christianity have an evolutionary view. And this is fascinating to me, right? All worldviews have an idea of evolution. I don't mean just biological. The atheists believe in a biological evolution. The Muslims believe in a theological evolution, that Islam will take the world. They're like Marxists with a God. Islam and Marxism have parallels politically. Certainly not the same idea. Muslims believe in a God, but they believe in the same objective. One says Marxism will rule the world. One says Islam will rule the world. They both came from angels. So the new spirituality is an idea that we control our own evolution spiritually. That's why Hollywood loves it. There's no God, you're God. You're divine as an actor. And so they're really into that. I'm controlling my own spiritual destiny because after all, I'm really rich and powerful. I must have been really good in my last life. And just imagine what my next one's going to be like. And if I just manage myself now, so it's all a self-focused, to make yourself grander. But it's based on the idea that the universe is divine. Islam, of course, like us, has some aspects. We won't go through that right now, but not a big difference philosophically, except in the nature of God. And then Christianity, the battle of ideas. We're here. Scripture offers us, I'm on page 216. We have to see that evidence is important, and Scripture offers itself up to reason. So the Bible is inviting us to think. It's not a book written by one person. If it was, I'd be out. I can't believe anybody would want to be a Mormon. And they actually have a university. I mean, Joseph Smith was morally bankrupt, had no evidence for any tablets, no evidence any of us are God, no evidence for a mother and a father God having babies and planting them down here in bodies. I mean, it's just all a grand story that came out of the mind of one guy. What's the truth value in them? None. Jesus Christ visited the USA? Where'd you get that? So, evidence. We're into evidence, amen? I got evidence, and the Bible is not hiding itself, saying, well, this book was written here. You got 66 books written over a lot of time, and it appeals and answers the questions of science, history, and personal experience. So there is history, and I had a history professor, Clifford Wilson, who did archaeology studies, and he said they use the Bible because it's the only book that was accurate for historical details of every place it mentioned. It mentioned distances, the size of the ark, everything's there. No, maybe this and that. So it's historical, it's scientific, and it explains that animals are lower creatures than we are. So I'm never going to pray to a cow. We are higher than angels because angels are not family in the Bible. Angels are servants. So that's why Lucifer wants you. That's why he visits and brings books to people, because he has to get your imagination activated. He has to get you to go out there and slaughter 100 million people once you become a Marxist, listening to those ideas, or decapitate thousands of people and bomb them if you listen to Islam. And again, I'm not saying, and I better be careful, I'm not saying we don't love Muslims. We just don't love Islam. I don't love any philosophy. I love Germans, but I don't love Nazism. I love North Koreans, but I do not love communist government. So we must be free to talk about ideas separate from peoples. Do you agree with that? I think so. Otherwise, you can never talk about anything. You can't talk about flying a plane. You might insult the pilot. Well, we've got to talk about flying a plane properly, whether it's part of his culture or not. Okay, so Christianity, we'll get to that. But Christianity appears to answer the questions in a way that can be lived. So here's the test of a worldview. If you had a club, we'll end with this, we'll go to the video. If you had a club, this was it, to find out where the world came from, the universe club, and we're all here, we would have to ask the questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? The 10 questions we've got. Where did I come from? What's the universe? What's a cow? Where are we going? What's morally right and wrong? We'd have to ask 4 categories of questions. Ontology, where did the universe come from? Epistemology, how do I know what I am? How do I know where things are going? Axiology is a question of values. What's morally right? What's morally wrong? Who decides? How do I know? Is the Canadian Supreme Court right or wrong? Should I obey them or not? Who are they? Why should I obey 9 people or 7 people? So axiology is the 3rd question. The 4th is teleology. Where's it all going? What's the purpose of life? What's supposed to happen in the future? How do I live if I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing? So those 4 areas, ontology, epistemology, axiology, and teleology, are the philosophical categories that humans have to answer. Like it or not, you're living, you're answering those, whether by default or by actively thinking about how you live. So Christianity answers the questions of life. It raises the questions of life. You can go to the Bible and it talks about animals. It talks about not praying to animals. It talks about you can eat them. It talks about who we are. It talks about what angels are, what a mountain is, what a lake is. we get the categories, we get a morality given to us. The Bible raises the questions. How should I behave? Jesus gave us at least the 10 commandments that have served every civilization that used them very well. So the Bible raises the questions, the Bible answers the questions, and you know what? It can be lived out. You can't live Hinduism. You can't live it. If everything is divine, you can't eat anything. You can't kill a mosquito or even a virus, because that's got to be somebody. The plague, the AIDS virus would have to be what? Some reincarnated person or being. So where do you live out that kind of philosophy that everything is divine? Can you log trees? Can you eat fish? I mean, it raises questions that are on it. Where did I come from? How do I know life is cyclical? So a worldview must be able to be lived. It must raise the questions, answer the questions in a way that can be lived. And Christianity does that. So that's our philosophy section. We're going to go back over it again and again and again as we go through the book. But let's take a break right now and we'll get into the video. So we're going to stop this session. Thank you.